afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be starting shortly. Our speaker today is Abigail Simmons. But before I hand over to Abigail, I'm going to just give you a little bit of information about BCS in case you haven't heard about us before. Before we get started, though, this is the third of our Pride talks. We have one final talk next week. These are our inaugural Pride talks, so we hope that if this isn't your first talk, that you've been enjoying them so far. And if it is your first talk, please let us know what you think. Give us some feedback at the end. We're going to start with just a small intro about BCS. Then Abigail is going to give her talk. And then afterwards, we're going to open up to any questions that everyone might have. Throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and we will get to them at the end. So without further ado, let me tell you a little bit about BCS. So BCS, so the British Computing Society, is a member-led organisation with over 60,000 members in 150 countries. BCS's agenda is to lead the IT industry through its ethical challenges, basically to make IT good for the future.
Sorry, I'm late.
And that is an interesting challenge, but it is something that BCS is looking to work on, and it is driven by their members that are part of the organisation. Now, BCS Pride is a member committee within BCS. Our member committees are what make BCS and what push BCS forward. BCS Pride is a new committee that was formed this year, with some of our goals including increasing the visibility of LGBTQIA+ BCS members, and also to work within the wider BCS membership to develop its understanding of the importance of diversity within the sector and to identify the issues that are faced by LGBTQIA+ individuals in tech.
Awesome. We already have screamers in the chat.
Yeah, it's a good start today. Okay, so we're going to hand over shortly to Abigail. She is the founder of Trans Tech Tent. She is a cybersecurity professional and is a senior cybersecurity incident responder, and also has the best cookie recipe this side of the River Taff. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Abby.
So thanks for having me here, guys.
Okay, so whoever that is who is the screamer, congratulations. Never had screamers before. Very nice, very fun, very good. It's a good change from the stalkers. Let's see if I can share my screen. Okay, do we have a presentation?
Yes, we do. I can see your screen.
Excellent. Welcome to Screaming into the Void. I'm about to talk about navigating the tech industry while queer. So let's see if my slides work. A little bit about me, a little bit about who I am, how I ended up here. Usually intro slides are a way of bigging yourself up, but hopefully this gives you an idea of how likely you are to relate to my advice and how useful that's going to be for you, and why you might need to make your own tweaks to some of what I'm saying. So on paper, you can see here that I've been a systems analyst. I went off to do a degree, fell off that, went off to be an intern for digital forensics and cybercrime, then completed a slightly different degree, was a security engineer, and now I am an incident response analyst. So I've taken a pretty clear tech career path. I haven't kind of gone all over the place, gone into different industries and then come back or taken a break like that. Outside of being chased out of my first university degree by a 70-year-old man with far too much time on his hands, I haven't strayed too far from the beaten path. So I got really lucky. I landed a tech support job out of school. I did that for 2 years. It was a little bit much at the end of those 2 years. You know, first line support gets boring pretty quickly. So I decided to start begging universities until one agreed to take me in. Thankfully, we had a great time together. Had a quick brush with homelessness. I wrote some really bad code to get through university, and even worse code in all my career. As you can see, I also collect red pandas. You may notice this is a recurring theme. So, boring industry monologue aside, I run an organization called the Trans Tech Tent. We fix things for people who can't afford it. And we help fight digital poverty. So, you know, if someone doesn't have a device to get online and sort their benefits out, someone doesn't have a device to get online, apply for university, we help sort that out for you. We also teach people how to do their own tech stuff. Right to repair is a big thing with us, and you should come say hi sometime. You know, we're working on a cisgender outreach program. So my esteemed trans allies in the room, you can all say hi and you can come be part of something cool in the near future. We have an online community if you want to join our Discords. We also are live on all the major social media platforms. So, tech careers. Just to sell anyone who is coming in here from outside of the tech field, who might be thinking about switching up, this is kind of what you can expect. You get good money. They run good conferences, good fun conferences, lots of money behind the bar. There's stable demand for the job. It's always a nice career, and everyone thinks that you are a wizard. So people look at you, hit sudo apt update. They see millions of lines of green text on the screen, and they think that you are a god and you control everything. Downsides are you do have to deal with some issues around ethics. There are some unethical people in the industry that we have to deal with on a regular basis, but those are okay if you learn the tips and tricks for how to handle them. You also got a lot of scam artists and snake oil salespeople, people who are trying to sell you products that aren't going to help you. And obviously, you know, when it comes around to Christmas, the one time you go back and see your family, they will ask you to fix their printer, and they will ask you to set up streaming for the football every time. So, you're graduating university. You're probably graduating university if you're watching this talk, or you're in the middle. And the careers module hasn't really told you much, because I've been to 2 universities and heard from many more that their careers modules are terrible. So let's take away all the outdated advice and all of the talk about wearing suits and ties and making your CV look really, really dull. Let's talk about some actual things that will help you with your career. Step 1, do not do crypto. Do not get involved in cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies are bad. So a couple years ago, this would have been a different slide. A couple years ago, with a little bit of finesse and a complete lack of morals, you could break into this market and you could have a couple solid years getting paid a lot of money to dupe a lot of people out of their money. Now, with the crypto crash as it is, the markets as they are, this industry is collapsing. And it's a bunch of people trying to peck at each other's business models to steal and get whatever they can out of what's left. So, bad investment of your time. Do not look into Web3, decentralized finance. They are dead-end tracks, much like crypto. So they also throw terrible parties. All of their parties are like 90% cisgender, heterosexual, white males, and very boring. You don't want to go to one. They'll spend all of their time talking about their latest sales pitch to you. Terrible. Speaking of, the BCS has recently released a questionnaire asking for people to give their opinions about crypto. So I've given my opinions about crypto here. I'm not going to tell you how to do yours. If you do see this, please do take the survey. Please let the BCS know what your opinions are about the crypto market and the viability of crypto assets. Now, to be serious, when we start out, it's difficult to break into tech, especially if you are an outsider. So, you know, you will have just anyone who does not look like your hiring manager, anyone who does not directly relate to your hiring manager when it kicks off, it's harder because you don't get that spark, you don't get that initial connection. So you're going to struggle. There are some there are some good tips and tricks to get you into the industry. So if you have a network, you should utilize that network. Conveniently, BCS and BCS Pride are professional networks. You should join them. Very good. Network of professionals does help. If you know who's hiring and you have said hello to them and they have seen your face, they are much more likely to put you through the first paper sift and into interviews. You're much more likely to get the job. So who you know, very important. And it's always been important in the UK. British hiring is dependent on connections. Unfortunately, that is the nature of the beast. There's not much we can do to change it, but you know, if they're going to set that out as the rules of the game, we can play the game and we can beat them at it. Very important that once you're actually in those interviews, though, that you show what you know. Now, this is in the BCS Code of Conduct, so you can read a little bit about that if you want to go through into the minutiae of everything that means. But, you know, a lot of people don't know how to big themselves up. It's very difficult. So figure out what you've done and what you can do and what you can demonstrate that you've done. You don't have to demonstrate every single thing. If you're a developer, you don't need to put a portfolio out every time to every person. But you need to be able to confidently say, I can do this. So if you've ever deployed like a server at home, like, you know, you want to host a little mail server, you want to host a web server, and you fire up like an Ubuntu VM, put Apache on it. You have experience with systems administration, and you can talk about the things that you've done and show them that you know a little bit about the field. Really good to have those projects under your belt, something to talk about. The main thing is when you're in the interview that you can talk to people and converse rather than just directly answer a question with them, because it's those conversations that make people think you know what you're doing. And by and large, you will know what you're doing once you get into that job. It's quite straightforward, a lot of the things that you start out with. And if you don't know something, don't be afraid to tell your interviewer. Don't be afraid to have that conversation about the fact that you don't know. You know something in the field, you've never been involved in the field, or you've just never heard of this thing before, but that you can learn about it. So try and relate something into that conversation, but don't be afraid to say, you know, I've never done this before. You know, I've never deployed a Kubernetes cluster, but I've done virtualization before. You know, I know the basics of that, so I can learn this quite quickly. Good tie-ins, really useful stuff for breaking in. So once you actually get a job, unfortunately, it does suck. Jobs are not fun by and large. Some of them are fun. Some people get to launch rockets into space as a job. Very cool, very good. Unfortunately, my job is chasing down cyber criminals, which, while it sounds very cool, unfortunately is not like the movies. So make the most out of what you can do in your job. If it's boring, make it less boring. Network with people, talk to people inside the company, you know, reach out to a different division. If you're in tech support, talk to some systems administrators, see what's going on, see what you can do to help, see what you can improve. And when I say improve, I mean, it goes both ways. What your skills can improve it and what you can offer them. You know, is there a process that they don't like? Can we change that? And those conversations that you build and those relationships that you build will kind of see you through your career. If they're going to pay for conferences, go to conferences, talk to your boss about it. A lot of people are big on skills building. Conferences are cheap. That's a nice value proposition for your boss to send you to a con. It's really valuable. If you're in security, you can go to your local security B-sides, unless you're in Cleveland. Don't go to B-sides Cleveland. Anyway, you can go to your local security V sites. They're normally run by people who live nearby, live in the area. So that's your local community that you can then talk to. And read your contract first, but check the training packages you're offered. If they want you to get something like AWS Cloud Practitioner, take that, take what they're offering, get it all sorted out. And, as long as you're not caught in a contract where you have to pay back the cost of all the training, take everything that they'll give you, because every certification you have is something that boosts your profile above others when you go to look for your next job. And always think about where your next job is going to be. You don't have to immediately have an idea, but it is helpful to have an idea of where you want to be in 5 years' time, where you want to be in 10 years' time. That can go completely out the window after 6 months and you realize that, you really don't like the career path you're on and you want to switch. But as long as you have a plan, you can work to it. That gives you something to build towards rather than just like unstructured chaos at work, which it often is, because they'll just throw whatever workload they can on top of you. Check the vibe of your workplace. Think about, do you need to start that job search now? Is it a really bad environment? Are people being annoying? Is there constant infighting between the developers and security? Are people acting like children around you? Is it more a babysitting job than a building job that you want to do and be a part of? You can put your CV out and you don't have to tell your employer you're looking for a new job. You can tell them the day that you have signed the contract that you're handing in your notice, and that is perfectly acceptable and a fine thing to do. That's if things are going bad. But a lot of the time, things are going, things are stepping along. You're not upset with the role. It's going okay, and you're progressing. But there's nothing above you. There's no senior role. There's no manager role that you want to step into there. So you might think, maybe in a year's time, I'll head somewhere else, and put that into your plan. And of course, if your employer passes the vibe check, as mine does always, then you can stick around. You can enjoy that time that you've got there and make the most of it. You can safely say, I'm going to be here for the next 5 years. And if I'm going to be here for the next 5 years, I want to start doing these longer projects, these bigger, more ambitious things. And those ambitious things in that workplace will raise your profile. So there's a place for all of them. No matter what job you're in, no matter how bad it is or how good it is, you can make something of that. Like I've said, I've done tech support, I've done systems administration, digital forensics, and security engineering. They're all different fields. They all have different specialist skill sets. And I didn't think that they would all help me with incident response, but every single one of them has, because I've had that perspective from those other roles in industry. So, even if I had a job where the one person who I was working with was kind of a creep and a little bit leery, I learned a lot of skills and then I jumped out, got a good job. Don't be afraid to walk out if things do get too bad, though. A lot of people want to force themselves to stick with something. You get 6 months into an internship, or you get 6 months into a role, and it's a slog the whole way through. Your manager isn't managing you. The person that you're working with or the team that you're working with are kind of shutting you out, and there's not much you can do about it because, there's no reason to go to HR, but you're not having a great time. Don't be afraid to just dip out. Sometimes it needs to happen. As someone who has a university degree, and a lot of the time, even just someone who has enough of an interest that they would come to one of these talks, you probably do already have the skills, and you definitely have the mindset that makes you an in-demand professional. People want you in their company. There's no shame changing the company you work for. Every time that I've jumped ship, it's been to something that's been bigger, even if it didn't look like it. I took a pay cut going into my internship role, but the skills that I gained and the connections that I built during that time were more than worth it. So, you know, don't be afraid. No matter where you land, you can make something of that. Now, fun story about how my career went. My last job, we're going to force us all back into the office because the CEO is very lonely and he was about to make that 1,000 employees problem. They lost half of their dev team. So I wasn't the only one who jumped ship, but I got offered double the pay I was on. I got offered full remote, so I could work from home the whole time. That was my contract. That would never change, no matter what happened. I got bumped up from a mid-level to a senior position, and I got to work somewhere that has a much healthier work-life balance. I didn't log on at 9, knuckle down, get my head around stacks and stacks of work that would far too much for one person to deal with, spend all of my day complaining about how we need an extra person. And then it was all of a sudden 8 p.m. I spent an extra 3 hours working and I didn't know what to do with my day. So quit when things get bad, but do it with a purpose. Now, on the subject of problems at work, please join a union. Lots of people will tell you some interesting stories about what they think about unions. It does not make your job prospects worse. You don't have to tell anyone that you're in a union. You can just do it quietly on the side. But fundamentally, without saying that HR are bad, because they're not, they do their job and they do their job well. HR's job is not to protect you, and HR's job is not to prevent discrimination against its employees. HR's job, first and foremost, is to stop there being a problem for the company. And if they can do that, they will. So HR at one of my jobs, despite my official documents saying all of the correct information, they decided to take all of that and instead misgender me on all of my documentation. Now, that was an absolute nightmare because that went through to my pension scheme, which I had to change. That went through and it would flag with my bank, which I had to change. Went through on my health insurance, which I had to change. Every single thing, I spent 2, maybe 3 months chasing up that kind of paperwork. And it was such a nightmare. HR, when I brought that up with them, kept trying to bury it for even more months. And they didn't fix the problem at any point. So, as nice as HR are as people and as great conversations you can have with them, they're not there to help you. They're there to stop complaints. That is why unions exist. Because as much as they want to stop there being a problem, if you call your union in for this, it's already a problem. And because the union is there saying this is a problem, HR don't have to convince you to drop the issue by making it too much of too much of a faff to chase. They have to convince your union that this is no longer a problem. And they have to say, here's what we're doing. Here's how we're fixing the problem. Because your union won't just sit by. Your union won't just let you take it sitting down that HR won't fix the problem and they can't be bothered to fix the problem. They can take that up and they can escalate that. They can go to ombudsman, they can talk to lawyers, and they do that work for you. So you don't have to deal with all of the nightmare that is discrimination law. So join a union. If you wish to join Utah or the Communication Workers Union, here is a convenient link. Other unions are available depending on which industry you are in. The United Tech and Allied Workers, Utah, is probably your best bet in the UK right now for tech workers. Unite and Unison, I think they're both public service. So, you may find you're in an employer where that helps you. GMB as well. There is the IWW sitting there looking from the sidelines as one big union. It's actually quite small in the UK, so 50-50 on that one. But if you do work tech for delivery drivers, the IWW will help you. So, Careers 102. So, specific queer stuff for getting a job. Your recruiters are queerphobes. They don't want to be. They don't think they are. They, if they see you in public, they'll have a nice chat with you and, you'll have a great time together. The problem is when they look at recruiting, subconsciously in their minds, they're thinking, oh, am I going to get mocked for sending like a weird person over? Or, is someone going to think less of me because I've sent someone over who doesn't fit in with their particular biases? That kind of thing. So, they're not malicious, but they kind of suck when it comes to trans people. And I did an experiment. I ran 2 LinkedIns side by side. One of them was my old LinkedIn pre-transition, and the other one was post-transition. They had exactly the same information on, and they had the same connections as well. So kind of one-to-one replicas. And you would notice that the recruiters would message exclusively. They would either message both of us or only a pre-transition account. So you will need to rely on networks, and you will need networks more than most other people. Like cisgender people tend to have a slightly easier time when they're not dealing with all the other intersections that are coming at them from all sides. So rely on your networks. Find networks of people like you, or networks of people that are accepting and good with you. You don't have to put up with toxic environments. You don't have to sit through, communities that are horrible. Move around, find the good one that works. The right employer is out there for you. The right employer will come along, even if you have to get through an extra 50 job applications, but they will be there, and they will be sitting there ready with a warm seat for you and plenty of career advice in the future. So, an important question. This usually comes up quietly. It never really comes up in a Q&A because no one wants to ask the question. Should you be out at work? I have worked in 2 jobs where my life would have been at risk if I came out. And I don't say that because I think there's a conspiracy against me. I'm not making educated guesses. Some of the people who I have worked with have been red in the face, violent at the concept of certain members of the queer community. So it's not always safe, but you can always tell when it's not safe. So, don't think that, if you're sitting around there and everyone's it's a tepid atmosphere, that all of a sudden you coming out is going to ruin everything. You can always tell when people are that way inclined. If you can come out, then, it's good. It takes a lot of stress off you, it takes a lot of pressure off you. The trans acceptance in the UK is trending in some directions, but in the tech industry it's particularly bad. No matter how much pride stuff we do, no matter how many pride flags appear on industry sites over this month and this month alone, sometimes you'll work with client facing roles, sometimes they're unpredictable, sometimes your manager is very obviously, like I've had to deal with, sometimes your manager is so inclined that it's not safe. But figure out how the wind is blowing where you are. It's difficult for me to tell you what to do. You can figure it out. I can just tell you the kinds of things that I've looked out for in the past. See what the environment is like. You'll get a certain vibe. It will hit you. I personally, I guarantee it. You can read that level of the room when there's tension and you're not going to get along with your manager. You don't have to turn up at work wrapped in a trans flag. You don't have to say authentic self 3 times in a mirror so that HR make a company announcement about you coming out. I walked out of my last role. Instead of coming out, I just left the company, and I did not tell HR at any point. I didn't tell my boss. I didn't tell the co-worker on my team at the time, because it just wasn't something that would have worked out for me. But that doesn't mean that I didn't come out to anyone at work. My previous job, I did talk to, so we had two teams. I was in the engineering team, and we worked very closely with the SOC team, security operations team. And I talked with them a lot, and I was kind of out to them by the time I'd left work. I talked to them, we got along really well. We talked about how we were like neurodivergent, how I in particular was queer, and it all just kind of meshed and worked, and we had a great time. But it was very siloed away from having to be out to everyone. So take your time, tell people what you're comfortable telling them about. And if you feel like there's, if you feel like you're not going to be so well received elsewhere, let the person you're talking to know that you don't necessarily want that information shared. People who you talk to are good people, and they will help with that. But, they're not just going to go around going, oh, this person, Abby in security is a massive queer. They're not going to do that. People by and large are very normal. It's just whether or not you want to deal with the one person who isn't in your job. So if you are out, different advice for different people. If you are out and if you're in the closet here. So if you're out, set some boundaries. You aren't going to be a good ambassador to the trans community. You're not going to be a great ambassador to the gay community, the bisexual community, any of those things when you're still figuring yourself out and you don't know what the answers are to questions. It's the same for everyone. It's not your job to be an ambassador unless, you've taken a diversity and inclusion role as an ambassador for those people. It's not your job. You don't have to answer questions about it. You work in a professional environment. So get some healthy boundaries. If someone approaches you to do D&I training and you don't know how to do D&I training, you can just say no. It's not going to impact your career negatively at all to have those boundaries. It's much worse to take something on bigger than you can chew and have it all go wrong. So, if people do want you to be a face for like their monthly Pride quotes as well, you can also say no to that. It's no big deal. HR don't mind. They'll put out something else on their social media for Pride Month. So it works at a personal level as well. If someone kind of sidles up to you and starts like beating around the bush, talking about everything apart from the question of are you gay or are you trans, you don't have to, you don't have to make things less awkward for them. You don't have to go, I know what question you're asking and the answer is yes, or anything like that. Sometimes you can just ignore it. But de-escalation can play a
Abby, I think we've lost you.
Should be back.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yep, sorry. Sometimes I think it's a microwave. Something sets off the connector for my headset. It's never fun.
Don't you just love technology?
Oh, I know. Yes. Don't put your audio receiver next to microwave equipment. And for the person outside in the van, please turn the antenna away from me. No, we're back. And where were we? So de-escalation. Sometimes instead of dealing with a question you're being asked directly, you can respond in ways that don't answer. So you can turn things into a joke to take the heat off. You can have a different conversation. You can steer things away gently from the original topic. If it's uncomfortable to you and you don't want to engage with that, you be you first and foremost, and don't deal with the premise that someone else is pushing on you. If someone starts coming over and talking to you about women in sports, you don't have to have that discussion. You can make a joke about you can make a joke about a cis person in sports or something like that, just to take the heat off, and give them an answer without answering the question. Something that is, however, very underrated is escalation. Sometimes someone is being a little bit leery. Sometimes someone is being a little bit off kilter. Sometimes you need to know when to get a point across that the conversation isn't worth their time. You know, we're not here to placate them anymore. If they act a certain way and they don't respond to de-escalation, sometimes you need to go, you know, is this really what you want to be doing? You need to escalate, which means not necessarily just like going to your boss and being like, please help, he said mean things about me. A lot of the time it's getting your hackles up performatively. You don't have to be angry. You know, you don't really have to be mad. You can just be very tired of them and tired of what they're talking about. But you have to make it clear to them that this is not where they want to go. If they keep going down the line of conversation, it's going to end badly for them. So we did actually have a woman in sports conversation at work, because it always happens without failure every single time. So it happened, and I knew the talking points and I knew where they came from. I knew it was from a Joe Rogan podcast. So they'd started talking and they got kind of weird talking about trans people in sports. And I kind of jumped in. I'm like, you know that none of that actually happened. And I went in like a very active monologue about how how it didn't happen, why it didn't happen, and where they got the talking points from. And the amount of energy that I put into that response, just debunking it quite straightforwardly, the amount of energy that went into it made it very clear. And the animation in the way that I talked made it clear that this is a boundary. I'm telling you these things. I do not expect a response from those things. And they were quite, the one person who was a problem knew to cut it, and the others were like, oh wow, I didn't know that, because they don't want to make things awkward. It's them then de-escalating that helps as well. And advice for when you're in the closet, if you can't be out at work, find spaces where you can be. No one likes to put on the mask before work every day and then take it off and then have nowhere to vent. Find somewhere where you can scream about things. Find somewhere where you can let off steam. There's nothing worse than spending years and years of your life knowing exactly where you want to be and what you want to do, but not being able to do anything about it. So talk to people outside of work. Find a good community. If you're trans, find a nice trans community, or just an LGBT community. If you can't find a specific trans one, really good to sit around with. Kind of applies to everywhere. It's not just for work. It is for university. It is for home. If you live in a household that's kind of, a little bit behind the times, finding spaces where you can go and just take off whatever costume you have to put on around them. So if you need to find somewhere physical, do that. If you can deal with just a couple online spaces, a nice couple chill chat rooms where you enjoy each other's presence and just chat about normal life things, but without all of the pretense, do that. Really valuable, really useful, and it will get you through the hardest times that you've got to deal with. Advice specifically for university students: you're there for 3 years, you're there for 4 years if you're in Scotland, or 5 if you're in Scotland and you do an industry year, however the university system works. University is a liminal space. It's a passage between your secondary school life and your wider working career. University will disappear faster than you think. You won't see anyone you don't want to when it's all over. If you have a lecturer who gives you a hard time, they're gone. 3 years, that's it. You never have to see them again. You never have to talk to them again. You can enjoy your life. Same with people who are unpleasant. And what you can do with that, knowing that those 3 years afterwards, you don't have to engage with those people, can mean huge things for personal development. Live how you want to. Take that time to figure yourself out, explore, take the plunge. Even if you're nervous about doing something, just get in there, get yourself involved. And this goes for, figuring yourself out personally and professionally. If you're in tech, do a programming competition, give it a go. I did it 2 years in a row and we came bottom 10% both years. Coding was not for me. Coding still isn't for me. I write horrible code. Anything where you have to start doing object oriented, my brain just fries. But it was great fun and I learned loads of things. So I can write a couple scripts now. I came out of that much better than I went into it. It was really useful and I enjoyed that time. And I was really nervous about getting into that because I thought I would fail. But then, when you set the bar as like, I don't need to succeed, you have a great time and you learn something no matter what happens. So give it a go. Talk to, if you are a very closeted queer and you have never talked to anyone else who is queer before, and you've come from a village into the middle of a city university, join the LGBT society, talk to some people, go to some social mixers, find out what works for you. You don't have to keep going, don't feel obliged, but do what you want to and take a couple steps outside of your comfort zone. You can be really messy about it. You can be rough around the edges. Everyone else is at university. No one's figured their life out. And the ones who say they have are having an existential crisis in the background when they say it. Also, with your university degree, do some work once a week, no matter what it is. Just once a week, do some work on an assignment, even if it's not due for 6 months. That's just personal advice for anyone who's got ADHD. The deadline will approach faster than you think. You will have 3 days to complete it, and then you'll realize that you've forgotten another assessment, and it's all very knock-on from there. So while you're enjoying yourself, and while you're going out there and figuring stuff out, have a little reminder in your calendar to not forget the studies part. I think that's me done. And I think we're about on time as well.
Yes, we absolutely are. I mean, that's pretty much perfect on time, actually. So we've got about 15 minutes left. Now we're going to open it up for any questions that anyone might have after that, because that was great. And I personally really enjoyed the uni advice, and I loved your line about how anyone who says they've got it all worked out at uni is having an existential crisis in the background, because as an older learner in university, I have nothing figured out still, and I've got like 8 years industry or 8 years professional experience behind me, and I still haven't got it all worked out. So I'm certain that that's a universal experience at university.
Very much speaking from experience on both sides there. Yeah, I was kind of the group mum. I was the one who did all the organizing for everyone, and everyone was like, oh, you've got it all so put together. And in the background, I was just like, I get home, I crash out, I stare at the ceiling and think about what I'm doing with my life.
Absolutely. I mean, I who hasn't had one of those experiences? I mean, surely that's part of the whole process.
Exactly.
That was fantastic. So whilst we're waiting to see if there's any questions that come through, I actually had a quick question about the trans tech tent, actually, just for something a little bit different, because you mentioned it at the start of your talk. But I wanted to ask, what was the big motivation for you to start the trans tech tent? What was the thing that kind of triggered it for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I found communities of my own. And when I say I found communities of my own, I mean, I got very, very lonely. And the one trans friend I made at university, because I was a very good ally in university, the trans friends I met in university was like, look, you're trans, come and meet these trans people. So I went and met them and we had a really good time. We hit it off and, we worked well together. We merged. We had similar goals and similar life stories. And it turns out that a lot of the people in that community couldn't afford to fix tech. So I was like, oh, I'll fix your laptop. I'll fix your phone screen. I'll swap out the phone screen. I'll show you how to set up like redirect on your email and all of that. And before I knew it, as things went on, and as I was kind of like filling that demand, I was like, I need more people to help, and more the merrier. Let's make a group around it. So we all ended up making a big old organization that tries to fight tech poverty.
That's pretty cool. I do have to admit, I've been following your work there for a while, and it's a fantastic project because it's needed. There's too much tech that is wasted or thrown away, first of all, because it could be easily fixed, but there's so many barriers to getting things fixed. And then it's addressing that tech poverty as well. It is, and it's a big thing that affects a lot of trans communities, because unless you are in tech, the earning potential of a lot of trans people is lower than the cis counterparts, or at least it was in a study that I saw recently, which is the sad truth of it, really. So anything that can help is massive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think trans women earn something like 60% less than their cisgender counterparts. For trans men, I believe it's somewhere around 20, and there's no studies that have been done on non-binary people because, of course, statistics have not caught up with the times.
Yeah.
But
it'll get there. It'll get there.
Exactly. Poverty in the trans community is pretty rife, and one of the major issues is there's also a lot of overlap with the disability community.
Yes.
A lot of people who are disabled, and this is something that we found, that we got a lot of disabled users who go to university, they get a DSA laptop, and that's the only piece of technology that they can afford and that they have. And they're awful. DSA laptops are spinning Rust hard drives, terribly slow. The minimum amount of RAM you can put in them, they can barely run a YouTube video at 1080p. So why not take them in? Why not switch out a couple parts? Spend £20 of our money making it something that they can use properly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's awful to me, really, especially considering there's so many uni courses now that are relying on that virtual presence as well, and having a laptop that can't keep up with it is
everything's online, and to give someone a piece of technology means that at least they can technically engage with the service. But what's the difference between someone, with a Ryzen 9, like the fastest processor you can get, is probably better than Ryzen 9 now. It's been a while since I checked. Getting like the latest Ryzen processor and getting the fanciest graphics card and engaging with a service where nothing ever buffers and nothing ever lags, to being someone with a terrible device, someone who's got like 20 seconds to load a page to submit like a claim for extenuating circumstances in uni. It's just the fact that we have decided that bare minimum works for people who are from disadvantaged communities doesn't track, and we want to fix that.
No, you're 100% right. You're 100% right, because it chews up so much time and energy and everything else. As someone who's recently upgraded their PC from a rubbish laptop, I can confirm that it does take up that much time, and it makes things so much more difficult. I had another question for you as well. So you spoke a lot about how making space to unmask if you're not out at work, but in a slightly different vein, how do you go about looking after yourself, or what's the biggest piece of advice for looking after yourself when you come across situations at work where you're constantly sort of butting up against people because of who you are as a person? And by this I mean, how do you look after yourself whilst you're waiting for the next thing that you can move to?
Yeah, of course. So I have said, like, if you can outside of work do things that help, that's really useful. Having somewhere to vent to is a big thing. You come out of work, it's 5 o'clock, you put your headphones up, you sit in a new chat room, and you're like, these people are horrible. And venting takes out most of the stress of the day. But, when you are dealing with people specifically in work, specifically people who can get up in your face, there's a couple things. So it depends on obviously your office dynamic and your environment. Sometimes you can sit yourself somewhere that's slightly more out of the way, so you don't have to deal with them as much in the day. But what I find is helpful is it's called cover your own arse policy, something that is very familiar to people who work in tech support. And it's, if someone's being a horrible person to you, only engage in things in ways that you can record, and watch how quickly they turn nice. Yeah.
Yes.
So I have had branch managers back in my old tech support job, branch managers screaming, raving, off the charts, angry at how something wasn't resolved. And the reality of the situation was that someone had cut the Ethernet cable that went into their office. It was a building contract that it had nothing to do with us, and unfortunately it was an OpenReach cable. Not our fault, not our problem. No. But we did get the call out sorted. Branch manager would call every 5 minutes asking for an update and asking what's gone wrong and screaming at us for doing a terrible job. And I was like, okay, you're on speakerphone. You can talk to everyone about this problem, but I have explained to you what's happened. And the tone changed completely. It went from, you're all terrible at your jobs, how dare you, my people can't work, to, oh, I understand that you're all doing the best that you can, oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh no.
You know, sometimes conversations that people feel are private and personal between the two of you can get much more heated. So bring things out into a social environment. And in that social environment, things are usually much safer and much more cordial. And I'm not saying, you know, leak every chat that you've ever been in or anything like that at all. Just when things get too much, remember that you can take that step back out into the public and make things between the three of you, maybe CC and your manager, something like that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that makes perfect sense. To be fair, I have also worked in customer service, and I've had a similar experience of making sure that everything's covered. So that makes perfect sense. And yeah, I do completely understand how someone can turn on a dime like that, which is unfortunate, but it's unfortunate that you have to put that out there for people to be decent human beings. However,
yeah, some people didn't learn manners, and some people have continued throughout the remainder of their life without ever learning them.
Yes, they have. Yes, they have. Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left. What I'm going to do now is just quickly before we finish off, in case you are interested in joining BCS, we do actually have a BCS Pride promotional code. If you are interested, we would genuinely love to have you on board. BCS Pride could always do with more members, because honestly, it's the members of BCS that push forward the change that we want to see, and, you know, be able to help make the tech world better and make it more of the world that we want to see. And so if you head to the BCS membership page and you use BCS Pride, you will get 20% off your membership. And just before we finish up, I guess, Abby, have you got any sort of closing words, anything you'd like to finish us off with today?
Yeah, sure. If you are a trans person, come visit us at the Trans Tech Tent, come join our Discord, come have a chat with us. If you are not trans, we are still working on a policy that allows cisgender people to enter without causing any danger to the trans people inside. So bear with us on that one, but you can still come and see us at all our socials, say hi. What else? Save red pandas, they are endangered. Find a charity to donate to, plant more trees.